I drove through the slushy streets of Oakbrook, windshield wipers fighting the icy mix, the same streets we used to race bikes on as kids, before we grew up and forgot how to be kind to each other. The December sky had already turned black, and the streetlights shimmered on the snow like tiny spotlights, as if the night was preparing to put on a show. I knew I was driving into something, not just a dinner, not just another night with my brother's carefully manicured family. The last time I saw them all together was right after Mom's funeral. No one talked much then, either. Just nodded, passed the casserole, and waited for someone else to say something brave. Now, 2 years later, I was pulling up to Damon's house, his forever home, as he called it in the Christmas letter he sent to the extended family. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, and a mortgage wrapped in pride. Holiday wreaths blinked like sales signs on his windows, and the marble driveway had been salted just enough to let you know he'd thought ahead. I sat in the car a moment longer, not because I was nervous, because I needed to remember who I was before I stepped inside. The youngest, the fixer, the one who always came when called. I stared at the house and thought, you can tell who's loved in a family by the seat they give you at the table. Damon greeted me with a hug that ended the moment it started. Clarissa followed with her usual brand of perfection, smooth, polite, and cold as the weather. She wore red tonight, classic, calculated. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Their living room was a tribute to his ego. Photos of Damon shaking hands, cutting ribbons, and holding trophies. None of Mom. Not one. My father sat on the far couch, holding a glass of wine like it might explain everything. He barely looked up. "Glad you made it," Damon said. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. Dinner began slow. Clarissa asked about my consulting firm. Damon cut in before I could finish, making sure everyone knew just how small it was. "She runs it out of her apartment," he chuckled. "You could fit her whole business in our guest room." Polite laughs, tight smiles. I matched their energy. Mom used to say, "Be kind, but don't let them mistake it for weakness." I kept that smile pasted on, even when my jaw ached from holding it. When we finally sat for dinner, I saw the chair they'd set for me, jammed near the kitchen door, practically behind the serving cart. The seat you give someone when you're not sure they belong. There was a napkin at my place, folded into a leaf like Mom used to do for Christmas, except this one was stained, smudged, like it had been forgotten in a drawer. I sat down anyway. Small talk turned into business bragging. Damon shared revenue figures like bedtime stories, punctuated by his kids texting under the table. Clarissa commented on the wine pairing, the renovation, the cost of the custom lighting. I nodded, smiled, swallowed it all. When dessert arrived, cherry cobbler, Mom's old recipe, I felt the shift before Damon opened his mouth. He stood up, lifted his glass. "To family," he said, "and to knowing when to let go of dead weight." There was a pause. Laughter from Clarissa. One cousin chuckled, then silence. He looked directly at me. "In our eyes, you're already dead." No one moved. My father stared at his plate. I looked around. No one flinched. No one defended. I looked at Damon. Calm. Cold. I've buried enough to know death when I see it. This isn't it. I picked up my glass, finished the wine, set the napkin down gently, smoothed it out with my palm. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. I stood up, walked past Damon, past Clarissa, past the table that had once been Mom's pride. In the hallway, her photo still hung next to the coat closet. She was smiling in it. Not for them, for me. Outside, the wind burned my cheeks, and I let it. My breath clouded the window before I turned the key. I caught my reflection overlaying hers. "They don't know it yet," I whispered, "but they just freed me." Driving home, the quiet felt like armor. I remembered something Eleanor Roosevelt said. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And for the first time in years, I believed it. My hands were steady on the wheel. No shaking, just stillness. But not numb. Awake. 2 days after the dinner that burned me from the inside out, I landed in Dallas. The cold of Chicago still clung to my coat, but the Texas sun poured through the airport windows like nothing had ever gone wrong. I stood tall. This was work, not family, not shame. I told myself that more than once on the way to the hotel, Out loud, even. The hotel was stunning, modern, sleek, overly polished. The kind of place that whispers success before you even check in. The retreat was for high-level consultants and executives, and I was there as a moderator. A position I'd earned. Not handed to me. Not gifted. Earned. I focused. This wasn't about Damon. Not here. But then I saw the roster. His company's name, McAllen Hart, was listed right under the panel I was moderating. I stared at it longer than I should have. He wasn't presenting, just listed as a vendor. Still, the hair on my neck stood up. I forced myself not to overthink. Focus on the task, I reminded myself. But fate, it had other plans. I didn't find out the full connection until a pre-panel meeting. I was reviewing contracts and schedules when one of the client liaisons casually mentioned McAllen's secondary teams led by Langford. Damon Hart's under him, right? I nodded slowly. Yes, he's my brother. Oh, small world, she laughed, walking away. Small world. I sat there, pen in hand, eyes stuck on the name Langford. So Damon's boss, the man he worships, the one he name-drops like a prayer, is now under my project authority. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for distance. But now fate had offered me a mirror. 2 nights ago, he toasted to my death. Now he needed my approval to breathe. My pulse didn't race, my hands didn't shake, but my mind, sharp as ever. Later that afternoon, I was called into a private meeting with Langford. He walked in like he owned the place, even though he didn't. Grinned, extended his hand half-heartedly. Glad to meet the sister. Damon's talked about you. I nodded. Likewise. He sat, spread his papers out like a teacher addressing a student. Look, Erin, he said, his tone lazy, familiar. I'm sure you're great at what you do. This whole diversity focus in corporate consulting, it's working wonders for you guys. I blinked. He went on. People are hungry for women-led panels, really fresh perspective. He said it like I was a mascot, like I'd wandered onto the stage with a clipboard and luck. I met his gaze. Performance speaks louder than assumptions. His face twitched, but he smiled. Sure, of course. That night, I was reviewing logistics in my suite when my phone buzzed. Email. Internal chain. It had been forwarded to me accidentally. Someone must have hit reply all without realizing. I read it twice. Langford. Let the little sister play CEO for a week. Damon. She'll talk big, but it'll fizzle. Always has. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Not from hurt. Those words couldn't touch me anymore. From clarity. They weren't just dismissive, they were careless. And I was done being careful. I didn't storm out, didn't make a scene. I documented. Forwarded the email to myself, along with timestamps. I flagged the behavior. Quietly contacted the HR liaison for the client. I spoke plainly, professionally. No emotion, just policy, patterns, documentation. The next day, I ran my panel. Seamless, engaged, clear. Executives nodded. One VP pulled me aside after and said, "You ask better questions than most of our internal teams." I smiled. Thank you. During the QA, someone asked about managing conflict within partnerships. I answered without blinking. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't need to raise their voice. A few people laughed. Langford didn't. Later that evening, I sat by the window in the hotel bar, watching city lights blur past the glass. I remembered something my mother once told me. When someone underestimates you, let them, and then outperform them. I wasn't just here to participate, I was here to lead. By the following morning, I'd drafted a formal report, not just about the email, but about the systemic attitude behind it, the quiet misogyny, the misuse of position. It was professional, cold, laced with facts, not fury. I wasn't here to punish. I was here to make sure the next woman didn't have to flinch in meetings like the one I had with Langford. When I submitted the report to the board, I felt it. A weight shift. Not power, exactly. Responsibility. I'd spent too long thinking power meant control, but it really just meant choice. I could choose to protect myself now, choose to build better. On my last night in Dallas, I passed Langford and Damon in the hallway. They were mid-conversation, laughing. Damon looked up first, froze. Langford followed, his smile slipping as he saw me. I didn't stop, just met their eyes, steady, unreadable. They didn't say a word, and I didn't have to. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner. I closed the conference slides, packed away my notes, and sank onto the hotel bed. Everything felt heavier now, my limbs, my chest, the silence between heartbeats. I switched on the TV, flicking channels until a song drifted through the static, an old track from early 2000s radio. It was one Dad used to sing while we drove. I hadn't heard it in years. The melody cracked me open. Suddenly, I was 12 again, in our cramped living room, Christmas lights blinking behind me like distant fireflies. A lyric hit me in the throat, and I froze. My head spun. A wave of nausea rose. That song had been a time capsule, locked deep, and here it was, swinging the door wide open. You'd think a tune couldn't carry weight, but it did. In that moment, I felt every suppressed tear, every shame I'd buried hard. I swallowed. The hotel walls felt too thin. I heard Damon's laugh in the past, echoing now in my skull. I closed my eyes, and the memory surged forward. I was on stage, shaky, performing something simple, a poem, maybe. My stutter caught me mid-phrase. Damon stood in the audience, smirking. Parents, laughing. They treated me like entertainment, like a spectacle. "Be less sensitive," Mom whispered later. "Life will break those who can't take it." That night, I understood how fear gets taught as a lesson. And I let it stick. It wasn't the words, too sensitive, that cut deepest. It was how they laughed, how they made me laugh too. I'd been given a role, silent, unseen, small. That moment shaped every boundary I built, every refusal to open up. My phone buzzed. An email from Janelle, my childhood friend who moved away in high school. She said she saw Damon bragging about humiliating his sister at a recent reunion. She wrote, "You didn't deserve that. You were always the smartest one there. They just feared it." I stared at the screen. Validation. A crack in the wall of silence. That voice, someone who remembered me not as the sister, but as someone who mattered, fractured the loneliness inside. I realized something. My fear wasn't imagined. The pattern existed. It continued now, not just in childhood, but in dinners, boardrooms, emails. They had tried to rewrite my story. Janelle had handed me the original ink. I lay back, heart racing. Anger and relief mingled. Shame recoiled. I felt visible, real, not broken. I sat at the small hotel desk, journal open. I wrote down everything I remembered, the laughter, the stutter, the way Dad's hand shook when he poured wine. I wrote names, images, details I'd ignored for years. No judgment, just truth. I recognized a thread. Every time I resisted, I was told I was too much. Every growth was met with a maneuver to shrink me. That realization burned hotter than regret. Later, I walked onto the balcony. The Dallas lights stretched before me. Quiet towers, distant traffic, stars blurred by haze. I sipped wine, tasting memory. I let tears come, not from sorrow, but from unburdening. I didn't need to cry for forgiveness. I cried to remind myself. I survived. Then, I drafted a letter. Quiet words for me. Dear Damon, I am not your shadow, your foil, or your stepping stool. I wouldn't send it. It was an anchor to my reality. And somewhere deep, I felt a shift. The wound no longer defined me. Morning light came through thin drapes, but it felt heavy, like everything was waiting. I sat upright in the hotel bed, replaying last night's confrontation in my mind. My thoughts drifted back to the dinner napkin. Mom's old leaf fold, now stained and crumpled. That small thing had become a symbol, reminding me why I'd left so many parts of myself buried. Today, I vowed, the fight would be from a place of clarity, fact, not fury. Opening my inbox, I saw one flagged thread. Participant feedback, Langford. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to leave it untouched, but silence costs too much. Clicking in, I braced myself. I wasn't here to wrestle shadows. I swallowed and opened the message. The header read like a trap. At the client's Dallas headquarters, the meeting room felt colder than usual. Glass walls, corporate minimalism, ambition suspended in the air. I presented my proposal, walking through market analysis, competitor gaps, revenue projections. I felt in flow, calm, prepared. Then Langford interrupted. "Nice groundwork, Erin," he said, voice low. "But let's not overstep roles." My pulse stuttered. He clicked slides, my work, my slides, footnotes reading Source, Blaine Legacy RD. My heart sank. He was republishing my files under his department's name. He sat back, arms crossed, satisfied. I paused. They'd tried to redirect authorship, erase me from ownership. I demanded, "Can you show me the original version with authorship logs?" The room went quiet. Langford faltered. I stood steady. Later, back in my suite, I pulled up the secure server, my home base. I found spreadsheets I'd last edited, overwritten by older versions with lower figures. Someone had reversed me. I dug into revision history. A user, C. Blaine, accessed these files late last night. They weren't hiding it, they were daring me to catch it. They're trying to erase me from the data trail. I began logging every change. I walked past Damon's office, his silhouette framed by his glass door. I stopped, my throat tight. "Mind if I talk?" I said. He looked up, surprise flickering. I asked, "Why steal my work? Why pretend I never existed?" He shrugged. "This is business. Don't confuse it with family." I said softly, "Then it's a business I'll rewrite, starting today." I turned and left. His gaze followed me. At my desk, I sent anonymized copies of the tampered files, to client liaisons, to Torin. I didn't post publicly. I built foundations, not headlines. Kennedy once said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." I whispered that. The war was coming. I would pick my field. I woke up before sunrise, the kind of morning where the air feels too still to trust. My suitcase lay half-packed near the foot of the bed. I finished folding the last shirt, zipped it shut, and sat for a moment, staring at the soft light bleeding through the curtains. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear. Today wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, plain and clean. When I checked my phone, the first thing I saw was a new calendar alert. Executive wrap-up meeting, attendance required. My name had been added overnight. No one had asked me. That had Langford's fingerprints all over it. I smiled. If this was his idea of a trap, he'd underestimated what quiet preparation could do. I showered, dressed deliberately, and looked at myself in the mirror before leaving the room. No fear, just facts, I told my reflection. When facts stand still, lies panic. By the time I reached the boardroom, the air was already thick. Everyone was there: Langford, Damon, several executives from the client's headquarters. The blinds were half open, sunlight cutting harsh lines across the table. Langford opened the meeting, his voice confident, rehearsed. "I'd like to highlight the collaboration that made this project possible," he said smoothly, "particularly Damon's division. Their innovation brought the projections to life." He was rewriting history. My history. I waited. When they called for final remarks, I stood, calm. My slides flickered on the screen. Data comparisons, timestamps, access logs. No accusations, just patterns. "There seem to be discrepancies in the data versions," I said evenly. "These are the audit trails from the secure servers. You'll see 2 access points after my last save, both outside the approved chain." The room shifted. Eyes darted from me to Langford. I didn't look away. "I'm not here to assign blame," I continued, voice steady, "but systems record what people forget. Integrity doesn't demand applause, but silence cannot protect fraud." A pause fell, the longest kind of silence, the one that comes when truth hits the table. Damon leaned forward, hands clasped too tight. "You're overreacting," he said, forcing a smile. You always interpret things emotionally. I stayed still. Then you won't mind transparency. I slid a flash drive across the table. Chain of custody reports, unaltered. You'll see everything there. The executive sitting nearest to Langford picked it up. We'll have legal review this afternoon, she said, eyes sharp. Langford's posture stiffened. Damon's smirk evaporated. I didn't gloat. I simply closed my laptop, nodded politely, and said, "Thank you for your time." Outside the boardroom, the hallway was quiet except for my own footsteps. Then I heard him, Langford. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said, following me out. I turned. "You knew what I was." "You just hoped no one else would see it." He gave a half laugh. "Don't think this means you've won. People like you don't last long here." "Then maybe," I said softly, "it's time people like you started lasting less." His smile vanished. I walked away, heart steady. Back in my suite, I forwarded copies of the files and the full audio recording to Torrin, my lawyer. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. "This wasn't revenge," I murmured, hitting send. "This was the warning I should have given years ago." On my way out, I passed the hotel dining area. A young woman sat at a corner table with two older men, both talking over her while she tried to finish a sentence. Something about that scene stopped me. I stepped closer and caught her eye. "I think she was making a point," I said gently, turning their attention back toward her. The woman blinked, then smiled, small, grateful, like someone being seen for the first time. I walked out into the Texas heat, the door closing behind me. My suitcase rolled steady on the tile, echoing in the hallway. I felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because the truth had finally started speaking for itself. By the time I stepped back into my house, the night had settled in like a thick, silent curtain. No wind, no crickets, just stillness. I didn't bother to change or turn on any lights in the rest of the house. I went straight to the office, locked the door behind me, and sat down in front of my laptop like it was the only solid ground left. I already knew Damon wasn't going to go quietly. A man like that never does. But I also knew he never believed I had the spine to strike first. He underestimated the woman who watched him lie, smile, and steal for years, and kept her mouth shut until it mattered. I powered on the secure laptop, waited for the blue screen to settle into life, and opened the folder I'd been building for weeks. It wasn't glamorous. It was timestamps, metadata, contracts with buried clauses, emails written late at night by men who thought nobody else was watching. I pulled up the logs and started cross-checking them one by one. Every number had to match. Every file had to be the real version, not the ones they doctored later. Halfway through, I stopped and sent Torrin a text. "Tonight is when we move." He replied almost instantly, "Standing by." There was no fear in me, just a kind of still pressure, like standing on the edge of a cliff, one gust away from falling or flying. I rechecked the files, opened the internal financial records, then the vendor contracts, clicked through the PDFs I'd pulled from a backdoor server Damon never knew I had access to. I didn't need to sleep. I needed it to be right. By 2 a.m., I had it ready. The dossier was zipped, encrypted, and labeled under a meaningless name that would only make sense to the people I sent it to. The board, the client, the reporter I trusted. And then I hit send. I didn't wait to see the fallout. I just shut the screen and leaned back in my chair, listening to my own breath. A few hours later, while I sipped stale coffee and kept my eyes on the news, the first headline dropped. Then another. Emergency board meeting. Internal audit launched. And then a whisper started moving through social media. Langford's project was dirty. Damon's signature was all over it. I sat on my couch in the living room, arms folded across my chest, the early morning light bleeding through the blinds. "This," I said out loud to no one, "is the strike they never saw coming." By afternoon, things shifted again. My phone rang. I saw the name flash. Tivon. That name used to mean support. It used to mean loyalty. I answered with a calm I didn't feel. "Erin, I'm sorry." His voice was tight, wrecked. "I forwarded your drafts to Croydon. I didn't want to, but they came after me." I didn't say anything. They had documents, emails, things from my past. They said if I didn't help them, they'd ruin me. I panicked. I should have told you. I'm sorry. I swallowed hard. My stomach burned, not from betrayal, but from the shame he carried in his voice. Do you have the originals? I asked. Yes, I kept backups. I'll send everything to you. It's done, I cut him off. Send what you have. I hung up before he could try and explain what didn't need explaining. I sat still, letting the reality settle in. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was something colder than that. Disbelief that you can know someone, really know them, and still miss the weakness growing in their silence. I opened a call with Torin and Micah. They both joined within seconds. Tivon folded, I said, but not by choice. I laid it out clean, how he'd been coerced, what he gave up, and what he still held on to. Micah looked stunned. Torin didn't blink. He gave us more proof than damage, I said flatly. We use it. We use him. Torin nodded. Then we frame it for what it is. They used fear. You're using fact. Exactly. I uploaded all the new files to 3 separate clouds. Redundancy was protection now. Then I drafted a statement. I wasn't going to release it yet, but I wanted it ready for when the next move came. I sat at my desk until the sky outside turned dark again. Tivon's voice lingered in my head. Quiet, ashamed, familiar. I couldn't shake it. I thought about the people I once believed were untouchable. Then I remembered a quote my mother had framed in our kitchen. They may not remember your words, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Damon made people feel small, afraid, dispensable. I wasn't going to do that. This wasn't revenge. It was truth catching up. My phone buzzed again. A notification lit up the screen. Breaking, Blaine Corporation under fire over internal leak. I stared at it for a long moment, then I exhaled slow and quiet. They found the leak, I whispered. But they have no idea who set the fuse. I got to the office early that morning. Too early. I wanted time before the calls started, before the eyes turned. The air outside felt cooler than usual, like the city was holding its breath. I sat down at my desk, logged in, and checked the news like I always do. But this time, something felt off. Not loud yet, just a hum. Headlines circling about internal leaks, whispered names. No one said mine outright, not yet, but I felt it, the way a deer knows it's being watched before the hunter pulls the trigger. I told myself what I always tell myself when the pressure builds. Truth is my shield. They can bend narratives, not facts. But this time, I didn't believe it as much. Then I saw the email. A journalist I'd worked with before, someone I once trusted. Any comments on the whistleblower inside Blaine? Off the record. I didn't answer, just stared at it. That phrase, inside Blaine, rattled in my chest. That's when I knew the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. By late morning, the article dropped like a guillotine. Was Erin Dresden behind the sabotage of Blaine Corp? My throat went dry reading it. They'd taken my email to the board, meant to warn them, to protect the company, and twisted it into some vengeful, paranoid ramble, like I was coming unhinged, like I had a vendetta. They quoted anonymous sources. Erin once said she'd burn the place to the ground. I did say that once, in private. After a night, Damon humiliated me in front of the staff, but they didn't print the part where I said it as a metaphor, for cleaning house, for saving it. The article claimed I falsified documents, manipulated timelines. It even hinted I was trying to take Damon's position, like this was all some power play. It didn't stop there. Clips of me speaking at past conferences were edited to make me sound combative. They replayed my rebuttal interviews, cut down to sharp, clipped moments. On social media, I became a caricature. The bitter woman who cried corruption after not getting her way. The avalanche was fast. Every time I tried to clarify, it got worse. People don't read corrections, they read headlines. I watched my name unravel in real time. By early evening, I left the office. I couldn't sit there, knowing half the staff was reading that trash behind their screens. Back home, I went straight to my study, locked the door. My hands were shaking as I plugged in my encrypted backup drive. This was my ace. The proof. The raw, unedited records. The audit trails. I opened the folder. Empty. I froze. Refreshed. Tried again. Still empty. Then a black screen popped up. White letters. Wrong turn, darling. I stared at it, heart hammering. I knew that tone. Damon used to call me that, darling, when he was about to cut me off in meetings or belittle me in front of clients. I clicked to recover from cloud storage. But the backup logs had stopped syncing the week I went to Dallas. The week I stayed at that hotel where the Wi-Fi kept dropping. They didn't just take my work. They deleted my legacy. My mind spiraled. Every timestamp, every whistleblower statement, the secure logs I'd collected, they were all gone, like I never existed in that fight. They're not just trying to take me down, I whispered. They're trying to erase me. I paced the room, trying to think straight. But the panic kept closing in. My breath got shallow. Then I sat down, slow, heavy. I looked at the shelf across the room. There it was, that stupid folded napkin. The leaf Damon once made at that fundraiser dinner. It was supposed to be charming, I guess. I kept it all this time, not for him, but as a reminder of how easy it was to fake care, how easy it was for people to smile and gut you at the same time. I reached for it, crushed it in my hand. And finally, the tears came. Not loud, just tired. I'd worked my way up from nothing. Stayed quiet through insults, let others take credit, bent when they told me to bend. And now, after all that, they painted me as a villain. I built something real, I said. They want to erase it. Then they'll have to erase history. I let the grief sit with me for a while. Didn't fight it. Didn't hide from it. Then, around midnight, I stood up, wiped my face, pulled my chair back to the desk. First, I called Torin. Post the logs, I told him. He hesitated. Even the deep ones? All of it, I said. If they want a show, give them the raw footage. Then I texted Micah. They came for me. Need you on record. Tell it exactly as it happened. No fluff, she replied. Already recording. They messed with the wrong people. I smiled, just barely. Then I opened a blank document and started typing. Not a resignation, not a plea, just clarity, a statement. To those following this madness, let me say this. You don't erase truth by smearing the messenger. You don't rewrite history by deleting a few files. I'm not stepping down. I'm stepping forward. By the time I hit save, the sky outside was turning from black to navy blue. Morning was coming, and I was still standing. I arrived early at the corporate headquarters. The lobby lights were cold, the air too quiet. Outside, media vans lined the curb, cameras, cables, reporters holding phones up like beacons. Security scanned my badge with more scrutiny than ever before. Damon and Langford entered behind me, faces taut, eyes darting. They knew the night ahead would determine everything. I carried a thin, reinforced briefcase, the final package. Inside lay every dossier piece, timestamps, chain of custody logs, internal memos, backups, the public statement I drafted. My hands didn't shake. My mind was clear. I told myself, tonight ends this. No room for doubt. When the board meeting began, I stepped forward. Damon tried to interrupt with a rehearsed denial, but I raised my hand and held the mic. I watched his jaw tighten. I laid out my dossier in full, the complete record of how he'd used my research, redirected vendor contracts under his name, and overwritten files I originated. On side monitors, I displayed side-by-side comparisons, my original documents, his published versions, edits done after I left Dallas. I spoke calmly, deliberately. The board members' faces shifted. Surprise, disbelief. One director stood. This is beyond nepotism. It's deceit and theft. Then Micah's voice came through in a video feed. She spoke of the initiative I saved years ago, how Damon later claimed it as his. She described meetings, timelines, how she witnessed original drafts that bore my name. Silence fell. Damon's face drained of color. Langford's posture collapsed. The weight of her testimony validated everything I'd asserted. I held my composure, letting her words speak. A director called for an immediate vote to reassess Croydon's role. Damon, now desperate, lunged. He threw a contract clause on the table, accusing me of insider dealing, alleging I'd been complicit in back-channel deals. The room gasped. I paused, allowed the shock to settle over them. Then I revealed a secure backup, dated after I left Dallas, showing Damon himself patched that clause later, retroactively. The accusation crumbled. Silence reigned as the board stared at him. By evening, the decision was made. I was reinstated into governance. Damon was stripped of executive duties, pending investigation. At the press room, cameras flashed. I stepped up and said, "We can't undo the past, but we can ensure it never repeats." My voice was steady. The next ride home felt lighter. In my dining room, the old crumpled napkin from Chapter 1 lay forgotten on the table. I unfolded it gently, smoothed it, placed it beside my laptop. The leaf shape seemed to breathe again, not as mockery, but reclamation. Tonight, I claimed my place, and I intend to keep it. Copy code, request acknowledged. Writing, Chapter 9. The resolution, moving beyond the past. In one continuous flow, directly below. Chapter 9. The resolution, moving beyond the past. I woke up before the sun. For a long time, I just laid there. No alarm, no rushing thoughts, just stillness. My body wasn't tense, but it wasn't relaxed either. Something in between. A quiet I hadn't felt in years. I rolled over, reached for my phone, and scrolled through the news. Every headline had my name in it. Some called me the whistleblower. Others painted me as the woman who held the storm together. I didn't feel like either, just tired. There was a voicemail waiting, from the CEO himself. His tone was smooth, diplomatic. He acknowledged my uncompromised integrity and extended an offer for a new advisory position. I deleted the message without a second thought. That wasn't why I did any of this. I didn't fight to land in a different seat at the same table. I got up, made coffee, and sat in front of a blank page. The letter wasn't for them. Not the board, not Damon, not even the press. It was for me. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was already yellowing at the edges, the ink slightly smudged from time. The handwriting was mine, dated the morning after Damon first locked me out of the family trust. I had written it to my younger self back then, but never mailed it, never shared it. I held the paper in my hands and began reading it aloud. You are not invisible. You are not what they say. You don't have to be softer to be seen. One day, they will choke on your silence. The voice in the letter wasn't polished. It was raw, angry, heartbroken. But it told the truth. I folded the paper again, then slowly, deliberately, tore it in half. Not with bitterness, just peace. I didn't need it anymore. By late morning, Micah stopped by. She brought groceries like it was the most normal thing in the world. We didn't talk about the meeting at first, just unpacked bags, swapped small updates, stood quietly at the kitchen counter sipping orange juice. Then she said, "You holding up?" I nodded. I didn't expect Justice to feel so quiet. Micah smiled, set down her glass. "That's 'cause you didn't win through vengeance. You won through truth. That kind of victory, it's not loud." We talked for a while. About work, life, maybe doing something together. Something outside of corporate walls and quarterly reports. Something that mattered for people like us, who never got the benefit of the doubt. It was a soft conversation, but grounding. It felt real. No cameras, no headlines, just two women sitting in a kitchen, tired and honest. Later that afternoon, I opened another drawer, this one in my living room. Inside was a photo I'd stashed face down years ago, a family portrait. I was maybe 7 in it, standing off to the side. Everyone else had their arms around each other. I kept it hidden all this time. I didn't hang it up. But I did place it face up on the shelf, not because I wanted to revisit it, but because I didn't want to hide from it anymore. I watched the trees outside shift in the wind. Leaves were falling now, quietly scattering across the yard. Autumn never asked permission. It just came. That's what healing feels like, not a ceremony, just change. I whispered, almost without thinking. I'm finally here, on my own terms. Evening came gently. I sat back at my desk, opened a new document, and titled it, The Quiet Power of Boundaries. It wasn't for a corporate report or a public takedown. It was an article for a nonprofit journal I respected, one that helped women reclaim their agency after betrayal and silence. I wrote slowly, carefully. Strength, I typed, isn't in the volume of your response. It's in the peace that comes with refusing to be reduced. As the sky darkened outside, the cursor blinked steady and calm. I finished the piece, saved it, and hit send. Then I shut the laptop, stood up, and turned off the light.